the Crucible. You know, you're gonna drive, and I guess we're the guests here. So we are men of our word. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I agreed to do the interview is because my own audience has had many questions about this since I began discussing the line essentially, and that's
Sure.
what I consider them to be. And I thought that maybe if they heard a lot of what I had heard, that they would kind of understand my thought process and how I got to some of these inductions. And so I'd like to start by going all the way back, and maybe you can tell us actually what the relationship was between Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk. What actually was it?
Yeah, I'd like to go first there, even
Yeah,
though
go
you have
ahead.
far more to say, Andrew, because I can just speak from my perspective as someone who arrived late 22, moved out here in 23, that I have never met Candace Owens and don't know her. Maybe I saw her in person once at a distance. Maybe I shook her hand. I've never had a conversation with her to my knowledge. And I think that speaks to something because I was with Charlie for close to 3 years. And I feel like I met most of the people Charlie was super close with. I met donors. I met his family members. I met his
Politicians.
team. I met a lot. And I don't know Candace. So I like to use that as a preface, but you have more that you can say about that.
Yeah, and Blake, you have that great video
Yep.
that everybody plays of you reacting to Candace.
Oh yeah,
the
where I'm
kid.
kind of like raising my eyebrow
Yeah,
a little.
it's fair to say Blake was early on the being suspicious train. Yeah, if you go back far enough, I mean, that's why. I mean, I put out that tweet basically saying, you know, Candace, your central foundational lie is that you and Charlie were friends. You were not friends, right? Show me something from recent, you know, the end of Charlie's life, the last 12 months or whatever. And I think and then I said 18 months, 24 months. I think she showed something at 22 months, and so I got community noted, right? Okay, whatever. What I can tell you is that I think Charlie and Candace were friends back in 2018, part of 2019. That did not end well at all, actually.
How come?
Could
You
you
know,
give more details there? Even I would like to
yeah.
hear that. Like, what caused her to depart, if we can say?
Well, I mean, there's two things really, and part of it is you got to give credit where it's due. She was a rising star. She was growing really fast. You know, Charlie famously sort of offered her a job. What did you? Sorry if I missed something that you said, Andrew. Oh,
No,
okay.
you're good.
Yeah. So she was, you know, Charlie offered her a job. Basically, right on meeting her, kind of saw that she was somebody that could help Turning Point, help the movement, in his opinion. And then you know, she explodes onto the scene. You know, Kanye had that tweet where it's like, I like the way Candace Owens thinks, kind of like a rocket ship, right? And then they had, but she became more and more difficult to work with, more and more issues with the team.
What do you
And then
when
she
you
had
say
that moment where
when you say difficult to work with? What do you mean?
I think, you know, she was very aware of her rising star power. And so she started exerting more demands on timing, on where she could be deployed, what schools.
So she was becoming like a prima donna.
You could use that
That's
word.
what I've heard. I've definitely heard complaints from people who have worked with her.
Yeah, and that continued on after when we started working with her later on. Just, you know, I think she canceled an event with us, and our event team still tells this story, you know, like the day before, and we had to scramble to get it replaced because she ended up in like France with Kanye or something the next day. And so anyways, the point is that it was just an ongoing kind of growing frustration. And then she had that event where she basically said it was great if he just would have stayed, you know, in Germany. Stayed in Germany, which, you know,
Now,
there's a lot of problems with.
to be fair and charitable here, right? Just to be as unbiased as possible. I did go back as that seemed like it was the turning point for Turning Point was that actual clip. It
Sure.
didn't. It seemed to me that she wasn't actually trying to make any sort of like apologetics for, but rather she was trying to make a comparison to nationalism and saying that as a nationalist, she thought he did a good job. And then, you know, she basically just kind of misspoke and buried herself with that particular lead. But obviously it became a massive PR nightmare for Turning Point, right? That's how that ended up playing out.
Well, I think it's one of those statements where you can defend it and then, you know, in isolation, and then events afterwards, I think, lend greater clarity to it.
Yeah, it was
'Cause
part of a whole.
Yeah,
And
like the defense you could make is, oh, she just meant, oh, he wanted Germany's economy to grow. He wanted to undo Versailles. She didn't mean the weird,
Kill
you
all
know,
the
all the
or whatever,
except
yeah.
then 2023, 2024, she actually becomes obsessed with the all the time.
Yeah, I would say it was part of a whole, though. To your point, yeah, you could, if that was a one-off, you probably could have defended it. But then we had a bunch of chapters that were really up in arms about it, and then you had this. I think it was the Christchurch in New Zealand that like said she was this guy was inspired by Candace. It was like a whole bunch of stuff, and so it didn't leave on good terms. But you know, Charlie, being a gentleman, wanted to make sure that the transition happened in a I guess you would say like a kind of a soft landing sort of way. Tyler Boyer helped her start Blexit and file the paperwork. I think the original paperwork was filed at Tyler's house at the time, is the story I've heard, but who knows the details. And you know, provided her with some donor money that and donor contacts, and there was some issues there as well. You know, anyways, the point is there was a lot of, I think, hurt feelings. It didn't end well, but Charlie's always a guy that is willing to sort of let bygones be bygones. He was always focused on the greater mission, the movement.
Coalition
was not
builder,
a
right?
guy that, yeah, it's a coalition builder, and he wouldn't focus on internet feuds. He never got into that. One of the reasons that we were probably slow to respond to some of this stuff is because we were trying to emulate what Charlie would do, which was I mean, people would attack him all the time, and he would just kind of like be like, "Hey, we're going to rise above it. We're going to keep doing good work, and that's the way forward." And I mean, eventually, at some point, it becomes impossible to do that, right?
And
In this instance,
it's genuinely sad in that I think she and others were able to take advantage of Charlie's own goodness as a person, that if he has differences with someone, he's usually going to operate privately. He's not going to speak about it. I mean, we know plenty of other cases where Charlie had drama with donors, and he wouldn't even necessarily share it with other people in the organization, because he wasn't a guy who was just spewing out, you know, his problems, his beefs, his concerns, his feuds.
Well, that's
And that was one reason he was a good bridge builder, because he
Right.
would repair things with people later.
yeah.
Well, these things would be essentially counterintuitive if you're trying to have this massive reach of coalition building for the purpose of winning elections. And nobody takes away from Charlie Kirk or Turning Point USA that they likely assisted a great deal in Trump's election, which means that this coalition building that they did actually worked quite well. So I don't think that there's anybody's disputing any of that. The main question just becomes this: one of the kind of landing pad for these people is they start with the assumption that Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk were besties. They were great buds. They were the besties of all besties. They were great friends, and they always were great friends. And she's just trying to find out what happened to her friend. But that narrative, as I learned when I was there, actually is not, in fact, true. And so that's what I'm asking you to speak to. Is is there any real truth to that narrative at all?
No, and especially at the end, I would say, you know, okay, maybe 22 months was the cutoff. I don't know what the cutoff was exactly, but no, I said it online, and I'll say it again. Charlie was basically managing that relationship. He saw what she did to the Daily Wire. She saw that became a huge
spat where he originally sided with her.
Yeah,
in that.
He did. Because in our history with Daily Wire was, you know, mixed, right? We had differences of opinion politically. We weren't always sure, you know, where that relationship sat. But Charlie, it's a great example, though. Charlie was the one who invited Ben to speak at AmFest in 2024 and 2025. He personally invited him. And so he was willing to kind of say, hey, what's in the best interest of the movement? Do we have 80% agreement and 20% disagreement? Okay, cool. Let's do this together. And so, yeah, they were not in any way, shape, or form friends in any traditional sense. But I think what would happen was, you know, for example, I would have to have the hard conversations with Candace. So that would fall to me or Justin on the team saying, hey, you can't speak at our events because you've been like too much. Sorry, you know, and then you'd talk with George and all this stuff. And he would send her like a nice text about, hey, I see, you know, attendance at Catholic churches is going up, right? So that was kind of basically the way the relationship worked. But she didn't come to his wedding. She didn't come to the memorial. I did actually invite her to the memorial, but she didn't come. I invited her and George, not to speak, but to attend, right? And that was before everything got really crazy. But I will tell you, Charlie, this is another proof point. Charlie, she called at some point, I believe it was February 2024. Things were getting going bad with Daily Wire, and she needed her own PR. And Charlie said, Andrew, you need to do this and help Candace. And I was like, I don't know about that. I have some misgivings, some pretty serious misgivings. And he was like, he wanted me to keep her, close to help protect the organization, and that was one of his strategies. And so, and I hate sharing this stuff because I like to keep Charlie's private stuff private. But like when you are constantly confronted with these allegations, at some point you're backed against the wall.
Yeah, and I remember the truth is it was a gradual process. So Charlie was taking Candace's side. That video you mentioned where I kind of have a funny look on my face. That's happening where Candace was on her way out of the wire and he was siding with her. And I was telling him, Charlie, I don't think Candace has gone beyond the pale yet, but I think eventually she will.
You were early on that.
I've seen this process play out. It tends to not go part way and then
I remember
stop.
Blake kept predicting like she's on a bad trajectory here, Charlie. Like this is not going to end well. And I love that about always sort of like hoping for a redemption arc, hoping that he could pull somebody back in and get them into the fold. And he always held out a little bit of hope in that way. So
you saw this where it's like stuff breaks down. So I think even in spring of 24, she was doing events with us.
I think that was her last one.
The standard where Charlie's west of the Mississippi, she's east of the Mississippi. That goes away because she's going too nuts. And the communication is becoming less. The appearances are becoming less. And he's not going to go out and say, Candace is terrible now, I'm going to dump on her.
That's
just
Charlie's
not the nature
style.
of what Charlie was doing.
He would never do that.
And
I don't know if we've answered your question, but I mean, there's a lot there.
I
But
think you did.
Anybody on the team, by the way, like from the events team to the field team to senior people,
I did
to
ask
lower
around
people.
when I was there. I was curious, right? You know me. I can't help myself. I'm always curious.
I didn't
about
actually
this
see
kind
you
of stuff.
asking that, but I wasn't there the whole time. But I'm. It's fascinating that you did. So.
Yeah, I always, I'm always trying to dot my I's and cross my T's. I'm a curious person by nature. Let's
saw what
move
happened.
backwards a little bit, if you guys don't mind. Shortly after Charlie Kirk's, your first day back at the office, right? What is this like? What is the actual atmosphere like at Turning Point USA? Not just the founder and figurehead, but also close friends and in at least one case, family member is now he's been. What is the atmosphere there like at this time?
Like horrible. Like it's like that
question.
scene in Saving Private Ryan where like the bombs go off and just ringing. It felt like you were walking through a cloud. Everybody crying, hugging,
a lot of that,
comforting each other.
and at the same time, the way there's so much activity because everyone's
place
there
was
who's
buzzing.
normally not there.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of people outside.
Thousands, actually.
Thousands.
It became like
yeah.
a kind of a I don't know, like a shrine outside, and people were
People
making
leaving stuff,
pilgrimage,
which they can still do, by the way, if anyone is in
and
Phoenix.
People do
we
still
invite
come.
you to do
People
that.
do still come up and just pray, lay flowers, still to this day. But yeah, so there was just so many people around, and then like all these friends of the org throughout the years just wanted to come, and so there was just people that aren't normally here. They were here,
And there was a lot of distraction into activity because so many things needed to happen.
Yeah.
So Erica delivers a statement from the studio here. I believe was it Thursday night or Friday night? But it was very quickly.
Friday night was, so we came back. So here's what I say. So I flew from California to Salt Lake with or Orem, I guess, Provo, with my wife immediately. Then JD Vance takes all of us back down on Air Force 2 to Phoenix, which was like he still has my so much appreciation and gratitude I extend to him for that gesture. And I think on Thursday I did Steve Bannon flew to Salt Lake, or you know, and he actually wanted me to do a show, and I remember I just sobbed like a baby. Like I still think about that. Like I'm not one to really show emotion in public, but that day I just couldn't help it. And we were reading this tribute to Charlie, and I kind of just lost it on air. And then JD flies us back down to Phoenix, and then on Friday we all the team got together and we were like, we really want to do the show and just remember Charlie. And that was just like a really heavy day. And I remember Friday night, Erica, that's where she gave her first speech, actually right behind where Blake is sitting. Right there is where we set up just a podium lectern, and she gave that speech that was it just felt like the whole world needed to hear from us somehow. That was just this like collective
So
feeling.
let's back up a little bit here too. Again, it is completely fair to say that this environment that you find yourself in, besides the fact that everybody, of course, is sad, depressed, everything else because Charlie's. It sounds like this was complete chaos as well, just total chaos.
It was totally. It was so busy. It was quiet in like a heavy way, but we still had to keep doing stuff, which was extraordinarily
Think about everything that happens in the following week. We have guest hosts who are big names themselves. Each day we have some stuff that happens out of the White House on the Monday with Vice President Vance. So you have getting a team to DC to do stuff with the Vice President of the United States. You have super high profile guest hosts Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You have the memorial, which is a full, like the most massive event Turning Point has ever done.
So it's just madness.
That's on a turnaround of 10 days.
It was absolute madness. It still blows me away the way the team pulled together to pull off the memorial. Like that shouldn't be possible.
So is it fair to say then that you guys were leaning very heavily towards friends and influencers to help you guys get on track and figure out where you were going and what you were doing?
Of course. Yeah.
And so it stands to reason one of these influencers perhaps was Owens, right? That makes sense for why you would contact her, discuss various things.
She contacted me, I contacted her. It was both ways.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So in a way, some of these influencers that you are contacting to kind of help you get through a very dark time in Turning Point's history, the darkest time in Turning Point's history, and then one of them used this to their advantage to later leak these various messages and this type of thing in order to utilize that against Turning Point. Is that a fair statement to say?
I think that's a fair statement to say.
Doesn't that seem diabolical? Like that, like that.
It's deeply wounding.
Yeah, I've seen some horrible things, but it seems overtly diabolical to take advantage when it's the case that there's absolute chaos and a emotional turmoil in order to integrate yourself into that to later be used for the purposes of profiteering and to, quote, burn down this organization. So it's interesting. This is part of the reasons why I asked the pointed question, and forgive me, I'm not very emotional by nature. I just want to get to the actual facts. It does seem that some of these people took advantage of this because it was a dark time. And if you think that that's fair to say, were there other creators that came in to support you who you never thought in a million years would have?
Yeah, you would be one of them. You know, I mean, I try and keep things private. Like I genuinely, there's a part of me that's so disgusted I have to discuss any of this stuff because my nature is to, you know, use discretion and keep private conversations, phone calls private, right? And so I'll do that here. But yeah, there was absolutely a bunch of people that, you know, from the wider movement, you know, Turning Point had a lot of connections and still does, obviously, but with a lot of people, right? But not everybody. There were some people like yourself that we weren't connected with, or, you know, you insert name here that we're not really close to, but a lot of those people came out of the woodwork and just reached out and wanted to help and have continued to do so, actually, which is one of the, you know, people often ask Blake and I, like, how did you get through this? How do you get through it? Well, first of all, our faith in Jesus Christ. Like our faith is so foundational, and that was something Charlie was. I mean, he said he wanted to be remembered for courage for his faith, And, you know, he surrounded himself with a bunch of people that are Christians and Catholics and devout people. Secondly, my marriage, my wife and I, like, our relationship has been closer than ever. My kids, my family. But thirdly, it was the larger community rallying around us and continues to, and despite the attacks. That's what's been actually pretty encouraging. There's a lot of people out there that are sane, that don't, you know, maybe they haven't gotten into the fray, but they have our backs, or maybe they have gotten loud, you know, but the people I wouldn't have expected. I will tell you,
doesn't it seem
one
to
person,
be, I mean, real quick, I'm sorry to cut in. Doesn't it seem
That's all right.
to be an unrealistic, this is one of the problems I had when I was going back to falsify my own claim, was realistic expectations. So, first of all, Kirk wasn't just a figurehead. My understanding is that Kirk was very, very invested in the daily runnings of TPUSA. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was really, really hands-on, certainly, but he also had it set up in such a way that, like, if he had to go travel, do these tours, that, like, you know, the people he put
could
in
hold down the
positions
fort.
of power, they know what they're doing.
I mean, Charlie was a supremely talented manager in the sense of being involved in everything, but not micromanaging everything, because he recognized that was impossible.
I do want to address one thing with that.
So then isn't it unrealistic, the expectation that while all this chaos is going on and emotional turmoil, as TPUSA is trying to find its legs again while all this is happening, isn't it an unrealistic expectation that everybody's going to say all of the proper things, they're going to do all the proper things, they're going to have the best foot forward with every public image event? Doesn't that seem unrealistic on its face?
To me, it is, but you're also looking at this with in good faith, right? You're applying some amount of sympathy to us. What's been amazing, it's just, so like you talk about this first 2 weeks, you had people running all over the place. It was not even controlled chaos. It was just chaos, right? Because, you know, one of the things about Turning Point when Charlie was with us was, you know, it's like I had the title of spokesman, but Charlie was the spokesman, really. You know what I mean? Charlie was the drum beat at the front that would, you know, go do the interviews and things like that. So, you know, now you have all this media attention. You have all these people that are coming to you because they want to help. They want to do something nice for you. So you want to also meet them where they're at and try and, you know, fulfill the request. So you had that times like 100, 150 people just running around like crazy for the first couple of weeks. And it took us a little while to kind of like rein everything back in and get some like protocols in place, you know? So it was complete chaos, I will say.
Yeah, I understand. Now, you had wanted to make a point just before.
Oh, yeah, because so much had been made, at least earlier stages, about this like Doge audit and stuff like this. Well, I just want people to understand, Charlie, we talk about him being hands-on. Charlie, I don't know the threshold, but it was like $1,000 or like $500 or something. If there was an expense going out the door that was over, and it was like around that, but like $500 to $1,000, he had to review it first. Charlie knew where all the money like of the org was going all the time. I mean, he was a stickler for it. So these accusations like he was somehow a dupe or he was naive about these
and this has gotten insane
him.
over time. There was an episode maybe a month ago or so where Candace ran with the idea that Tyler had like progressively replaced everyone at Turning Point to turn this as part of this more mafia had been.
Yeah.
Candace.
So anyways, but the point is like Charlie just loved Doge. He was a big fan of Elon. He thought it was like a cool, like, you know, internal messaging. Hey, we're, you know, it's just,
I think it was literally on par with your high school. Like the idea is like find ways to be more efficient here because
it was
like
just
Doge.
driving internal excellence, iteratively excelling and getting better. That's all that was. It wasn't some like untoward thing where he's trying to hunt down, you know, people that are, you know, I guess laundering the money or something. You know, so it just many things like that have been misconstrued, portrayed wrongly, and just with like so little grace or understanding, or credit to Charlie for actually knowing how to run an organization.
So essentially, disgruntled former employee,
Basically
gets upset, utilizes.
Let's keep going. This is great.
tragedy. There
Yeah.
are a lot more questions that I do have. If you guys will humor me for just a few
Just
more
keep going.
minutes.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Why not?
All right. Well, let's fast forward now. We kind of went backwards a bit. We're going to fast forward to when these attacks really began to escalate, especially from the various people all over the internet. Many of these people who I've looked into have been at this for many years, attacking various organizations, attacking various content creators, anybody who essentially doesn't go along with their whatever it is that they believe. This month they're going to be ruthlessly attacked. You had mentioned earlier, before we started my end of the questioning, that TPUSA really didn't have any sort of online defense mechanism from this type of thing, nor was it expected, obviously. Could you dive into that a little bit more?
What do you mean, like an online defense mechanism? Sorry, just be a little
In
bit
other
more
words,
specific.
you said that Kirk stayed away from internet beefs. He stayed away from kind of the online drama sphere. He stayed away from that type of thing. So when these attacks escalated, were you just kind of caught by surprise that this was even going on, because it wasn't a thing that TPUSA traditionally had ever had
Yeah,
to
we
deal
were
with?
definitely not geared, probably, I would say, to fight that type of war.
Certainly the unceasing nature of it, because Turning Point had been attacked before. Charlie had been in
Usually by the
scuffs
left,
before.
though.
By the
Yeah.
left, or by more, you might say more moderate. Well, I don't even want to say more moderate factions to the right. We had the Groiper War way in the past, and those guys would go after Charlie. And sometimes you'd get, we'd been through a few rounds of people trying to say Charlie was, and I think that usually had some sort of factional struggle to it.
Sure.
And so he'd been attacked before, but I think what was special about this one is Charlie had never been the subject of conspiracy theories before.
Yeah.
And
Which, by the way, as you're seeing with the Lindsay Clancy stuff, it's like there's no reasoning with some of this
Yeah,
stuff. And you're
and
just like
so-
blown
but-
away at I think you called it
Well,
the
but-
fallacy of the gaps, where
Yeah.
people just like fill in
Evidence,
the gap. Like, that
it's-
was
but-
it's
completely
the evidence of the
but what I
gaps
mean is
fallacy,
we'd
yeah.
never been faced, when we say we've never been faced with conspiracy theories, a few natures of that is, if someone calls Charlie and or says he's bad or say he's a racist or whatever, even if it's an unfair attack, it has a certain concreteness and substance to it that you can engage with once or twice, and it can't really just go forever and ever. It's like a one-off thing. You respond to it or you don't. It is a successful attack or it fails, whatever, move on. But what we never had was, when I say we never had a conspiracy theory, we never had one of these things that they truly can just decide to push endlessly.
Oh, it was like they'd come up with something new almost every day. If you're like, how the hell did you get like the evidence of the gaps fallacy is like when I heard you explain that fallacy, which is a new one I hadn't heard before, I was like, bingo, that's what it is. Like, because every day it was kind of like a new thread that would get pulled, and I'm like, how the hell would anybody even like, we're not smart enough to pull off whatever the hell they think we're doing here. Like,
Well, one of the
nobody would have predicted.
One of the major dangers of using that sort of fallacious thinking, because it's not just fallacious argumentation, it's a fallacious form of thinking. You shouldn't think in patterns that way. It's because it's heads you win, and then or heads I win, tails you lose, right?
Yeah,
So the idea here
exactly.
is either you have to spend all of your time endlessly addressing those things, or you don't bother addressing them, and then your silence is an admittance, right? So
Right.
there's
Yeah.
actually that's set up in such a way to create a no-win situation for a person. If you address it, that's bad, and if you don't address it, that's bad. So ultimately, that's why the evidence of the gaps is a fallacious form of thinking. Now it's self-destructive ultimately, because people come to absurd conclusions. But while somebody's being victimized through that methodology, or being attacked by that methodology, it's very hard to defend against it, because either you have to waste endless amounts of time trying to defend yourself from the attack, or it is the case that if you're silent about the attack because it has no merit, that then your silence is an admittance of said attack, right?
Well, it's totally right. And I would add a couple things here too. When Charlie died, we lost our biggest megaphone, right? We lost Charlie having millions of followers to set the record straight on XYZ. So we lost a very practical, function right there. And, so there was that. Also, we were trying to keep up with this explosive growth of the org and all these kids that want to start chapters. We had real, and we were still doing the tour in the fall tour to pay tribute to Charlie, which went extraordinarily well, and all that was great. But it was like we had real stuff to do, and so you're faced with the do you, I'm kind of reminded of Michael Knowles while he turned down, doing your debate, moderating your debate. He was sort of saying like, I don't choose to engage this. Now you can disagree with that logic, but there was a part of us that were kind of going like, this is so absurd and it's so insulting that I choose not to sort of like even engage it, because like I don't owe you anything. I don't have to dance monkey dance when you tell me I owe you some piece of information here or there. And so there is that kind of thing. And then ultimately, obviously Blake has become more outspoken. I've become more outspoken. And I think the other thing that was interesting about this time is that people assumed that what Candace was saying about her relationship to Charlie and her proximity to the org was actually true. They were also assuming she was a conservative. And I think that has been both of which have been, I think, proven untrue. And, she'll deny that and she'll say that we were besties or whatever, but it wasn't true. Okay. And the point is those lines have gotten clearer in the months since, and I think that's been helpful too. So people kind of understand where the two sides are at.
So just moving backwards very quickly, back to Charlie and Candace's relationship, was he pawning her off on other people? Is that what was going on, just to kind of maybe not get her to not freak out? What was going on with that? Can you be
it's a soft landing. Yeah, trying to. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to be overly specific because there are friends involved and things like that. But it was a soft land. It's like, hey, we're not trying to like fire you and humiliate you. We're trying to do it graciously, and everybody can still be friends and all that stuff. So
gotcha.
Yeah, it was. But that's basically what happened in 2019, I guess.
The typical "you're fired, here's the handshake on the way out, and good luck to you," right?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of.
And then that iterated, right, when Turning Point took over Blexit, at some point, and I think Charlie was glass half full. Charlie was always trying to do things that were useful for the movement, and Charlie was always like very bullish on outreach to minority urban communities, and thought that with Turning Point organizational might behind it, Blexit could turn into something really powerful. And but it ended up being the wrong bet in that direction for many reasons. But so Charlie was always trying to build, and that's one of the things I love about him. But ultimately, in this instance, it was a massive backfire.